discovering that she was conducting an affair outside of our marriage. It was a stunning revelation to learn the facts. To this day, I can vividly recall the day when I was browsing through her texts and came across a conversation in which she disclosed that she had been sexting with her male best friend who was 8 years old. I had been informed on multiple occasions by Susie that he was nothing more than a friend who had been a part of her life for an unimaginably long time. I had a great deal of faith in her, despite the fact that I still occasionally experienced feelings of envy. I was really taken aback when I accidentally came across those sexual texts that were being exchanged between them because we had built our relationship on these trusting relationships. Overnight, it appeared as though every single one of my preconceived assumptions regarding our marriage had been completely eradicated. After I confronted her, she broke down and apologized sincerely for her situation. In her defense, she insisted that the encounter was a unique occurrence and that she did not appreciate her buddy in that manner. She assured me that it would not occur again and promised to prevent him from doing so. Even though I was hurt and angry, I wanted to trust her. I wanted to believe her. The betrayal that she committed left me feeling so hurt that I needed to know why it occurred and whether or not our marriage could still be healed. As a result, we started going to marriage counseling. During the course of counseling, Susie's expressions of regret looked to be genuine. In order to regain my trust, she exerted a lot of effort and acknowledged that she was responsible for her actions. A period of time passed during which it appeared like we were making tremendous progress. Clear and attentive was her demeanor, as well as ready to put in a lot of effort to make our connection better. I was still in love with her, and I wanted to believe that people could change and that relationships might improve, so I made the decision to stay and give our marriage another chance. On the other hand, as you may have guessed, that turned out to be a very serious mistake. Over the course of some time, I came to the realization that my ex-wife was making an effort to set up a secret meeting with her male closest friend on a particular evening. Earlier, she had informed me that she was going out with a coworker, yet there was something peculiar about her behavior, and I was unable to escape the feeling that she was lying to me. Immediately following Susie's departure, I took the impulsive choice to call the colleague in order to simply confirm the situation. My disappointment was compounded when they informed me that they did not have any such plans with Susie. A wave of bewilderment and despair washed over me, all at once. The fact that Susie was most likely going to meet up with this guy was becoming painfully evident to me. If she wasn't going to meet up with him, then she had no business being with me. On multiple occasions, I attempted to contact her via telephone. However, she would not answer my calls, and my mind was racing with ideas of betrayal. My feelings of helplessness and fear intensified as the hours went by, and I found myself increasingly terrified. Eventually, she made her way back to her house that evening, arriving pretty late and extremely drunk. My head was spinning with a whirlwind of emotions as I sat on the couch in our living room expecting her to arrive. I had been waiting for her all evening. She gave off the impression of being completely intoxicated, and she didn't even recognize me. While she was making her way to the bedroom, she simply walked right by me, as if I did not exist anywhere in the world. During the time that I was sitting there feeling invisible and absolutely broken-hearted, I came to the realization that the woman whom I had previously trusted and loved was no longer there for me. Just before I went to sleep, I was awakened by the sound of her phone ringing on the bedside table, accompanied by a notice of a new message. Susie had fallen asleep while still dressed in her evening attire, despite the fact that she was obviously too drunk to even be able to change. As I carefully covered her with a blanket and leaned over to check on her, I was experiencing a mixture of curiosity and concern. I wanted to know what message she had received. The moment I laid eyes on the number, I was certain that it belonged to her male acquaintance, specifically to him. My heart sank each time I read the text. That was a lot of fun to experience. The tongue and sweat drop emoji that was placed at the end of the message stated, "We should do this more often." This simply served to make the situation much more difficult for me. I felt ill to my stomach. In a message like that, a guy wouldn't use those emojis unless he believed that something significant had occurred between the two of them. When I thought of the terrible things that they may have done, horrible ideas came to my mind. Upon coming to the realization that my deepest concerns were most likely genuine, my stomach melted into a mushy mass. At first I attempted to calm myself, but it was unsuccessful. I could physically feel the betrayal in my chest, and the thought of them together would not leave me. I could not stop thinking this. Because of this, I was unable to get any rest that night. While I was lying in bed, I tossed and turned, and my thoughts were filled with feelings of grief and dread. As I continued to go through everything in my head, I found myself wondering how I had arrived at this place and what the next step should be. Even though the night seemed to go on forever, I was certain that by the time daylight arrived, nothing would ever be the same again. Whenever I confronted Susie about the night she had lied, she did all in her power to avoid taking responsibility for what she had done. When I first approached her, she made an effort to exert control over me, and to gaslight me by claiming that calling her coworker was a violation of her privacy, and that the real issue was that I did not trust her. Remarking that I was unreasonable and paranoid, she said. Despite the fact that I was irritated and frustrated by her attempts to gaslight me, I did not succumb to her pressure. I retrieved his memo, and I insisted that my question be answered. In addition to dismissing it, she referred to me as a freak for taking too much from it, and maintained that this is the way that friends express themselves to one another. The disdainful manner in which she carried herself just served to sharpen my determination to find out the truth. My choice is to use the last card I have. In the event that she did not reveal the truth to me, I threatened to face him. There was a sense that this threat had struck a chord. Despite the fact that she appeared visibly anxious and frightened about the potential outcomes, she made an effort to dissuade me from phoning him. After a great deal of resistance and reluctance, Susie eventually made up her mind and admitted. After she had become drunk, she admitted that they had, in fact, made out, and she also admitted that she had been longing to see him for a very long time. The statement that she made was like a punch to the gut. It confirmed all of my deepest assumptions and shattered any faith that I had left in her. She continued to rationalize her behavior by stating that our marriage had become mundane and that she was looking for excitement elsewhere. She said that she was looking for it elsewhere. I gave a vehement objection, bringing attention to the fact that our marriage had ended completely due to her lying and adultery in relation to our relationship. In the event that I discovered that she was sending sexts to another man, I informed her that there was no way that things could ever return to their previous state. Despite her repeated attempts to defend her behavior, I did not give in to her arguments. That she was totally responsible for breaking our vows and eroding the confidence that we had created was something that I made it quite clear to her. I expressed my profound dissatisfaction with her and expressed that I had reached a point where I could no longer overlook her behavior and pretend that nothing was wrong. I also told her that I had reached a breaking point. Despite the fact that she acknowledged the difficulty she was experiencing, she pleaded with me to avoid giving up on her. She was resolute in her efforts to improve both herself and our relationship. She continued to make promises, but I was aware that our relationship had been irreparably destroyed because of it. After some time had passed, I came to the realization that staying would just serve to postpone what was already inescapable due to the tremendous amount of damage that would be caused. We were unable to mend the rift that her lying had produced in our marriage, which resulted in the irreparable destruction of our marriage. After I found out about this, I was forced to make the most difficult decision I have ever had to make, which was to request that she leave my house. Due to the fact that we had a prenuptial agreement in place, I was relieved to know that it would protect me from any potential financial ramifications that may arise over the course of our divorce. She persisted and attempted to get her friends involved in an effort to get me to forgive her, but I refused to back down and eventually sent her out into the streets. She was able to persuade me to forgive her. I am aware that there is a possibility that this may come out as harsh, but I was experiencing an excessive amount of anguish because I had always thought that we would age together. I was broken by her disloyalty, and I came to the realization that I would never be the same again. My parents and my older sister, Nina, were informed of everything that had transpired between Susie and myself from my perspective. They informed me that they were in agreement with my choice to divorce Susie, which provided me with some solace, yet they were shocked and frightened by the news because nobody had anticipated Susie's actions. However, throughout it all, Nina appeared to be unusually silent, which I found to be quite fascinating. Taking into consideration the fact that she had been very close to Susie throughout the course of our marriage, I inquired about her thoughts, and she responded in a manner that was unexpected. In lieu of acknowledging the betrayal I experienced as a result of Susie's actions, Nina inquired as to whether or not I was certain that I wanted to divorce her. She made the point that, in contrast to me, Susie did not have any family support. Nina's response completely took me by surprise. She gave the impression that she was more concerned about Susie's well-being than she was about the emotional anguish that I was going through. My response to Nina was harsh, and I informed her that Susie had repeatedly decided to betray me by being unfaithful. I told her that she had made this decision. Regarding her support system, I didn't give a damn about things. I made it abundantly plain that I was no longer concerned about Susie's well-being, and I inquired as to the reason why she appeared to be more concerned about my ex-wife than she was about me, who was her own brother. Nina rationalized her conduct by stating that she was simply concerned about me and didn't want me to make a hasty decision regarding my marriage without giving it a lot of thought. Since she expressed that she was still unable to understand that Susie and I were not destined to be together, and that she was stunned by our divorce, she inquired as to whether or not I will have any regrets in the future. Despite the fact that I found her remark to be peculiar at the time, I didn't give it much attention after the fact. Due to the fact that the entire process was already emotionally exhausting, I made an effort to concentrate more on completing my divorce. At the beginning of my divorce, everything was going swimmingly, and my attorney was holding out hope that we would emerge victorious. However, things took a turn for the worse after that. The news that Susie was having a kid came as a complete surprise to everyone. This understanding came as a complete and utter shock to me. It was something that I had neither anticipated nor anticipated at all. Not only was it evident that life had different plans for me, but it also intended to cause me a great deal more harm. Upon receiving this information, Susie and her counsel begged with me to put an end to the divorce process. The argument that they made was that we ought to make an effort to resolve the disagreement since it was for the welfare of our child. Susie was insistent in her assertion that she harbored the desire to bring up our child in a traditional family environment. I was taken aback and immediately responded by telling her that I no longer cared about the child, and that it was impossible for me to ever have this child. Contrary to what I said, Susie stated that she had never been in a romantic connection with anybody else save me. It was made abundantly apparent to her that she could not become pregnant from her male closest friend, simply due to the fact that she had made out with him earlier that evening. She did not let up in her efforts to persuade me to protect our marriage and to give some thought to what would be most beneficial for our child. On the other hand, I was not going to be convinced. At the same time that I was aware that she was making a valiant effort to delay the divorce process, I was compelled by guilt to continue living with her so that she could continue to use my money to fund her luxurious lifestyle, in spite of the fact that I could tell that Susie was holding on to hope. I was resolute about ending the marriage. The divorce would go according to the plan, and I did not waver in my determination to see it through. During the time that Susie was giving birth, I promised that I would arrange for a paternity test to determine whether or not the child was mine. Our position, on the other hand, was rejected by Susie's counsel, who said that the fact that Susie was still legally married to me and had stated that she had not had any intimate relationships with other people automatically made me the child's father. Due to the fact that this occurred, they stated that they will pursue child support on my behalf. Despite the fact that there was no paternity test, my attorney firmly disagreed with the charges and pointed out that they were without foundation. It is unfortunate that we are all too aware of the faults that exist within our legal system, particularly with regard to the protection of men in situations such as these. I was served with a lawsuit for child support by Susie's attorney over the course of the subsequent several weeks. The lawsuit included evidence that Susie had never been in a romantic relationship with anyone else. It seemed as if they were trying to portray me as a controlling and strange individual who was trying to escape having to pay child support or accept responsibility for my actions. The witnesses who were called to testify on behalf of Susie's side participated in the proceedings. Nina, my older sister, was one of the witnesses, which came as a complete surprise to me. My mind never wandered to the possibility that she would be present. To my utter dismay, she testified against me, despite the fact that at first I believed she was merely there to observe and provide assistance. She stated that she had known Susie for a considerable amount of time and was certain that, given that Susie was still in love with me, my sister had assured her that she could not have betrayed me by sleeping with someone else. One thing that Nina made quite apparent was that she believed I was the parent of the child. Hearing that my own sister would defend my ex-wife over me was a terrible experience for me. Even though Nina was aware of how much I had loved Susie and how much she had hurt me, she was there to support Susie's dishonest behaviors. Nina was there to keep Susie from being honest. Following the conclusion of the court case, I approached my sister about the unexpected testimony she had provided. My feelings of dismay and betrayal were expressed by me. I am completely and utterly shocked by what she went and did. On the other hand, Nina did not waver from her position, as she assured me that she was acting in a manner that was appropriate and that I would eventually learn to respect her stance. I expressed my displeasure and anger for the fact that she had placed me in a position where I had to pay child support for a child whose paternity had not yet been determined. I stood up and told her how disgusted and upset I was. In response, Nina replied by stating that I should not be so harsh on a fetus, and that I should take into consideration the difficulties that Susie would have financially if I did not give her alimony and child support. Nina explained to me that I would never be able to understand her perspective since I was not a woman who had maternal feelings. She said this because I was not a woman. In this particular situation, she maintained that the bare minimum that I could do was to pay for the child's educational expenses. I was quite angered by my sister's perspective on the matter, and it made me feel like I was being misled. The idea that Mom could prioritize Susie's financial needs over my own emotional anguish was beyond my comprehension. I was at a loss for words. Nina was also informed by my parents that she had no authority to go behind my back and testify against me, and they expressed their dismay in my sister over this matter. Considering that the testimony of my own sister against me was successful in persuading the court that Susie could be telling the truth, and that I was attempting to free myself of the responsibility of caring for our child, the damage had already been done. In light of the fact that the court ruled in favor of my ex-wife, I was required to provide her with child support until the child reached the age of 18. Despite the fact that I was incensed and refused to acknowledge the result, my attorney and I were unable to communicate with the court, and they were unable to alter their decision. Despite the fact that it has been quite some time since Susie and I divorced, I have continued to make payments toward child support for Susie's son, who certainly does not resemble me in any way. Despite the fact that I have conducted a paternity test, and the results indicate that he is not mine, the fact of the matter is that the child rightfully belongs to me, because my ex-wife fell pregnant when we were still married. I will have to keep making payments until the child reaches the age of 18. For this reason, over the entirety of this situation, my animosity for my sister has grown to be even more intense than it is for my ex-wife. Nina is the only one I blame accountable for getting me into this difficult situation he does. For this reason, I have not communicated with my sister in any way, and I will not acknowledge her presence at any of the family get-togethers that we have attended. Every member of the family recognizes and understands the significance of my job. There are a number of cousins and relatives who, like me, avoid Nina's company because they harbor the same level of hate for her. Quite frequently, Nina has expressed her dissatisfaction to our parents on the fact that I have isolated her from the rest of the family. She defends her behavior by arguing that she acted in the child's best interests, which is the argument that she utilizes. Her attempts to win people over, on the other hand, have been unsuccessful because the rest of the family recognizes her foolishness and agrees with my decision. In the previous year, Nina and Joshua, who had been her long-term lover, tied the knot. Despite the fact that I was cordially invited to attend the wedding, I chose not to go. It was a disappointment for Nina to learn later from my parents that a large number of other members of the family were not present as well. She and her partner had been trying to conceive for a considerable amount of time, after they had tied the knot. The potential of our family finally having a grandchild was something that my parents expressed to me, and they expressed their happiness about it. My company recently had a conference in a nearby town, and I was required to travel there for work-related reasons. Following the conclusion of the conference, my co-workers and I made the decision to spend our free time in the hotel bar in order to relax. My sister was sitting next to an elderly man at the pub, and you can imagine how astonished I was to see her there. I was perplexed as to why she was in a late-night bar outside of town, especially considering that she was married. As a result, I made sure that she had not even noticed that I was there. As she moved closer to the elderly man, she whispered something in his ears that caused him to laugh, and I observed as she did so. My suspicions were heightened by the fact that they appeared to be flirting with one another, and were particularly at ease with one another. When I reached for my phone, I took a few of pictures without really giving it any thought. I did this in complete silence. In order to capture a clear image of my sister's face as well as the face of the older man, I took great care. I was in need of tangible evidence to back up what I was witnessing. As soon as I saw them together at the bar, my thoughts was filled with a mixture of amazement and perplexity. In what way could my sister, who is married, find herself in such a predicament that is so dangerous? It came as a complete surprise to me to discover that Nina and the man were still engaged in a private conversation while she was smiling and laughing. Following a period of around 1 hour, the man made a move for Nina to accompany him to his room, and she gave him a nod before getting up to walk with him. Upon coming to the realization that I was truly observing my sister getting set to cheat on her husband, my eyes widened in anticipation. It was almost as if I wanted to shout at her to stop. Having said that, I was aware from my prior experiences that dishonest people never have the ability to learn from their mistakes. Instead, they need to be taught in a classroom setting. As soon as I arrived back at my house, I made the decision to have a conversation with her husband, Joshua. I was of the opinion that it was of the utmost importance for him to be informed of the fact, rather than being taken by surprise along with me. Following my discovery of him on Facebook, I sent him a friend request and hoped that he would accept it. Following the realization that he had in fact accepted my request, which occurred after a few hours, I immediately sent him a message. In the message, I introduced myself as Nina's brother and stated that it was necessary for us to have a conversation about something very important. For the purpose of allowing him to call me, I provided him with my phone number and asked him to keep my sister from finding out that I had texted him. As I waited anxiously for his call, I maintained the hope that he would listen to what I had to say. A few minutes later, he called me and inquired about the reason I had contacted him in the first place. In spite of the fact that my parents and Nina had already informed him about me, he expressed his surprise that I had managed to get in touch with him after such a long period of time. I expressed my regret to him that I would not be able to attend their wedding and that I was sorry that we were having this conversation in this circumstance. When he asked me what was wrong, I told him the truth about what I had seen Nina and the older man doing in the hotel. I had witnessed them having a conversation. Due to the fact that I was unsure as to whether or not Nina and him were in an open marriage, I refrained from making hasty judgments and labeling them as cheats right away. When I told Joshua about what had happened, he became visibly disturbed and began asking me questions about what Nina was wearing and who the other man was. He did this while I was explaining the events to him. I stated that I had even taken pictures of her with the gentleman to bolster my tale because I was having difficulties believing myself. I used these pictures to support my story. As soon as I could, I forwarded those images to him so that I could present him with concrete evidence of what I had witnessed. It was clear that he was having a difficult time dealing with the gravity of the issue, and he was extremely distressed by the news that Nina had been unfaithful. Following a brief period of silence, he inquired as to the reason behind my willingness to go out of my way to assist him, considering that we were essentially strangers and that I was no longer in a relationship with Nina. What came as a surprise was that he expressed gratitude for my honesty. His inquiry moved me, and I felt obliged to answer by telling him about my own experience of being cheated on by my ex-wife. I wanted to get his perspective on the situation. As I went into further detail, I explained how Nina's evidence against me had made my suffering even worse, and how this had ended in me having to pay child support for a child who was not even mine. I also explained how this had come about because of Nina's testimony. Following the completion of my story, Joshua remained silent for a period of time. After that, he exposed the fact that Nina had provided him with a totally erroneous understanding of the circumstance. Considering that Susie and I had stopped having physical relationships, and that our marriage was already in the process of disintegrating, she asserted that Susie had committed a single mistake that eventually led to our relationship ending in divorce. Hearing this distorted. It was my own sister who was responsible for the destruction of my life when she helped my ex-wife coerce me into paying child support for a child who was not even mine. Let me begin by being completely forthright and stating that, despite the fact that it wasn't always this way, I completely despise my sister. When we were younger, Nina, my older sister, was someone I looked up to and admired a great deal. On the other hand, she has steadily shown me what a poorly behaved sister she can be. Please be aware that I was married to Susie for a period of 2 years prior to, filled with my parents calling me multiple times, telling me that I had ruined Nina's life because she was going through a divorce settlement. They expressed their dissatisfaction with the fact that they would never be able to have a grandchild from her as a result of this, and they accused me of unwanted interference in her marriage. Furthermore, I did not retreat from the point in any way. I responded by denying their allegations and said that I had nothing to do with their daughter's infidelity in her marriage. Rather than being obsessed with the possibility of having a grandchild, I made it very obvious that they should focus on imparting better morals and values in a sister, so that she can develop into a better person. A nasty message was sent to me by text message by Nina, in which she referred to me as a petty little guy who couldn't keep my nose out of other people's business. She even went so far as to imply that I was responsible for everything that had happened to me, and that Susie's adultery throughout the time that we were married was in some way acceptable. After I had finished reading her message, I was overcome with wrath. After my reading of her comments, it took me several hours to get my bearings. However, it came to my attention not too long ago that Nina is allegedly expecting a kid, which indicates that fate had other plans for her. Despite her protestations to the contrary, Joshua has stated that he is not the father of the child. Due to the fact that I was the one who took the photographs that accused Nina and the other man, Joshua has reached out to me and requested that I testify on his behalf in the event that their case is finally brought before a judge. I have given my agreement without any reservations, not only to exact revenge on my sister but also out of compassion for Joshua. The pain and betrayal that I had with my previous partner is something that I do not want any other man to have to go through. Since then, my parents and Nina have been putting the pressure on me to refrain from testifying on Joshua's behalf for an extended period of time. The phrase "family comes first" is repeated over and over again. Their communications strike me as ironic, particularly in light of the fact that Nina did not prioritize family for me first. AITA, for preventing the same thing that happened to me from happening to my sister's husband, and for teaching her a lesson? The first update, I am astounded by the fact that people's reactions to my piece are so polarized. In spite of the fact that my sister has definitely gone from the path, there are a few women who are trying to convince me to support her. This is an extraordinary amount of pressure. A shame on you is the only thing I can say to them. Despite the fact that she made the decision not to request child support after establishing the child's ownership, I can promise you that I would not have had any issues at all if my ex-wife had done so. Because she was unable to afford the child's care on her own, she made me knowingly liable for it. Despite the fact that she was well aware that the child was not mine because we were not even intimate at the time, she made me responsible for the child's care. Other than the one text that I was able to find, there was no other indication that she had sexual relations with that other guy. I was only able to find one text. I despise my sister Nina, since she has betrayed me and testified against the person I was previously married to. Having said that, I will not continue to support it now that Nina is manipulating her marriage in the same manner. I will testify against her in order to avoid Joshua from experiencing the same fate as that of the other person. Given that Joshua appears to be a kind individual, I have no doubt that he will take responsibility for the child in the event that it is discovered in the future that the child is his after the child is born. Nevertheless, unless that is proven to be the case, when a woman has been publicly having affairs with other men, it is absurd to demand that her spouse pay child support after she has been having such affairs. The fact that Nina had an affair and was the basis for the collapse of her account of the events incensed me, and as a result, I informed Joshua that Susie had duped me on 2 separate occasions, letting him know that she had repeatedly violated my trust with her male partner and that our divorce was not the consequence of a single mistake that she had made. Joshua, much to my relief, took me at my word, valued my candor, and brought to my attention the dishonest behaviors that my sister had been engaging in. I was informed by him that he would be discussing this matter with Nina, and that he also claimed that he had no intention of remaining with a spouse who had committed adultery. The days that followed were resolve. On the grounds that I was envious of my sister, her attorney attempted to have me withdraw my testimony. Nonetheless, the judge accepted the argument. I am hopeful that my testimony will be beneficial to Joshua's case, and that he will not be required to pay child support from this point forward. Furthermore, the outcome is still a mystery at this point. As a consequence of all that has been going on, the relationship that I have with my parents has been estranged. As soon as my mother understood that I had maintained my promise to testify against my sister, her voice was filled with sorrow. When she called, her voice was heavy with mourning. I was made aware of her apparent dissatisfaction, and she shared with me that she and my father had hoped that I would not do harm to my sister in this manner. During the time that I spent listening to her, I couldn't help but feel a wave of frustration. I told my sister that they had never fought for me with such fervor, and that they had even forgiven her for everything that she had done to me throughout my divorce. However, she continued to do the same thing to me throughout the entire process. Even so, despite the fact that she was crying and calling me a disappointment, she was acting as if the problems and difficulties that my sisters were experiencing were small in comparison. After that, I proceeded to tell my mother that it was unfair for them to reprimand me for speaking the truth and standing up for what is right, because they had not shown any support for me in the past. I got the impression that I had been deceived, and I made it abundantly clear that if they were going to prioritize my sister who had been unfaithful over me, then neither my father nor I needed to be a part of my life. Since that time, I have broken off all communication with my parents and have refused to respond any of their phone calls or text messages. The fact that Joshua was deemed to be in compliance with his child support payments to my sister is something that I am pleased to notify you about. There is no doubt that Nina is upset. I am filled with a sense of satisfaction when I realize that at least one individual was spared the unfair burden that a great number of other people, including myself, were forced to face. A couple more questions that have been brought up in response to my piece are something that I would like to address for the very last time. The answer is no. Despite the fact that I continue to make payments toward child support, I do not get along with Susie's kid. If the son ever comes to me as an adult, I will not hesitate to tell him the truth about his mother. I will not hold back. In point of fact, as a result of the fact that my parents have not been calling me every other day to accuse me of not supporting my sister, I must confess that I am experiencing a significant reduction in weight and a greater sense of calm. We have not yet communicated with one another. I have no doubt that Nina is still embarrassed by the fact that I testified against her, and as a result, she will not dare confront me. She will, in fact, receive alimony from Joshua, as we had long thought she would. My parents are aware that Susie's son is not my child, thus because of this, they do not have a close relationship with him. Despite the fact that it is possible that they will, I am not certain that they will accept Nina's child either. And that's it. Marriage is something that she has not expressed the smallest regret about. In contrast to my marriage, Joshua and Nina do not even have a prenuptial agreement, hence, it is possible that he will be required to pay her alimony should they get divorced. For this reason, I believe that he should not be obliged to pay child support for a child who is not his own. I believe that I am making the appropriate decision, and I am pleased to see that the majority of the individuals who have commented on my post are in agreement with it. Update 2. It has been quite some time since I last released an update. Yesterday I appeared in court and testified against my sister. Everything that I had saw her doing with the older man was reviewed by me, including all of the photographs and the documents that supported my claims. Throughout the entire process, I was aware of my sister's anger following me, but I did not falter in my